December 1944, the Ardennes. Dawn breaks cold and gray over a landscape scarred by war. Frost clings to the twisted remains of trees, and the ground is churned to mud by the tracks of advancing armor. In the distance, the guttural roar of German engines grows louder. A column of Panzer IVs and Panthers, their iron hulls glinting in the weak winter sun, pushes forward with confidence. Inside an American Sherman tank, 5 men brace for the onslaught. The commander's voice is tense, the gunner's hands steady on the controls. But it is the loader, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, who moves with a purpose that borders on desperation. He reaches for a shell, not in the standard way, but with a practiced, almost reckless speed, using a trick he's honed in secret drills and whispered about in the mess tent. Outside, the German crews laugh, certain of their advantage. They have faced Shermans before and expect another easy victory. But as the first shots ring out, something changes. The American gun fires again and again, faster than any panzer commander has ever seen. The laughter fades, replaced by confusion, then panic, as the advance begins to unravel. By the winter of 1944, the Western Front was a crucible of steel and willpower. The Allies, having broken out from Normandy, pressed eastward through France and Belgium, their sights set on the heart of Germany. But the war was far from over. In December, the German army launched a desperate counteroffensive through the dense forests of the Ardennes, a last gamble that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. For the men on both sides, the Ardennes was a place of uncertainty and fear. The terrain was unforgiving. Thick woods, narrow roads, and rolling hills that favored ambush and confusion. The weather was merciless. Snow fell in heavy drifts, muffling the sounds of battle and freezing men and machines alike. Visibility was poor, and the cold seeped into every seam of uniform and armor. German armored divisions, spearheaded by the formidable Panzer IVs and Panthers, drove deep into Allied lines. Their tanks were the pride of the Wehrmacht, well-armored, heavily armed, and manned by crews with years of hard-won experience. The German High Command believed that their armored spearheads could punch through the thinly held American lines, split the Allied armies, and force a negotiated peace. For American tank crews, the challenge was daunting. The M4 Sherman, the workhorse of U.S. armored forces, was reliable and easy to produce, but it was outgunned and out-armored by its German counterparts. Stories of Shermans brewing up under fire from Panthers and Tigers haunted the men who rode in them. The psychological edge belonged to the Germans, whose tanks were symbols of technological superiority and battlefield dominance. Yet, the Americans had their own advantages. Their tanks were numerous, their supply lines robust, and their crews adaptable. The U.S. Army emphasized teamwork, initiative, and the ability to improvise under fire. Tank crews were a cross-section of America, farm boys from the Midwest, mechanics from Detroit, students from New York, thrown together by war and bound by the need to survive. Inside each Sherman, 5 men worked in close quarters: commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. Each role was vital, but the loader's job was especially demanding. In the chaos of battle, he was responsible for keeping the main gun fed, grabbing shells from the racks, slamming them into the breech, and calling out, "Up!" to signal the gunner. Seconds mattered. A slow reload could mean the difference between life and death. The Germans knew this, too. Their doctrine emphasized rapid, coordinated fire, and their crews drilled relentlessly to shave precious seconds off every action. But the Americans, facing superior firepower, learned to compensate with speed, aggression, and a willingness to bend the rules when survival was at stake. It was in this crucible that one American loader, facing the relentless advance of German armor, would develop a trick that defied convention and turned the tables on the enemy. His method was born not of manuals or orders, but of necessity, a quiet act of rebellion against the odds. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just machines, but the ingenuity and resolve of the men inside them. The clash between German and American armor in the Ardennes was not just a contest of firepower, but of doctrine, training, and adaptability. The German panzer divisions, veterans of campaigns from Poland to the Eastern Front, relied on discipline and precision. Their tanks, especially the Panther and Panzer IV, were products of years of engineering evolution, thick armor, high-velocity guns, and optics that gave them an edge at range. German crews trained for coordinated attacks, using radio communication and practiced maneuvers to overwhelm their opponents. American tankers, by contrast, were often younger and less experienced. Many had only months of training before being shipped overseas. The Sherman tank, while mechanically reliable and easy to repair, was outmatched in a head-to-head duel with German armor. Its 75mm gun struggled to penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther, and its thinner steel made it vulnerable to return fire. American doctrine emphasized mobility, flanking, and the use of combined arms, tanks working with infantry, artillery, and air support to offset their disadvantages. Within this framework, the role of the loader was both critical and overlooked. The loader's task was to keep the main gun firing as quickly as possible. In theory, the process was straightforward. Open the breech, grab a shell from the ready rack, slam it home, and call out when the gun was ready. In practice, it was a test of speed, strength, and nerves. The loader worked in a cramped, noisy space, often in near darkness, with the tank rocking from recoil and enemy fire. Every second counted. Standard American gunnery drills emphasized safety and procedure. Loaders were taught to follow a set rhythm, minimizing mistakes and accidents. But in the chaos of battle, some crews began to experiment. They looked for ways to shave seconds off the reload, stacking shells in a certain order, pre-positioning ammunition, or developing hand signals to speed up communication. These tricks were rarely written down, passed instead from veteran to rookie in whispered advice and hurried demonstrations. Skepticism was common. Many officers and senior NCOs discouraged deviation from standard drills, fearing accidents or jams. The Army's manuals were clear. Discipline and procedure saved lives. But the men on the front lines knew that survival sometimes meant breaking the rules. In the heat of combat, a loader who could get a shell into the breech a second faster might save his crew from destruction. The Germans, for their part, were confident in their superiority. Their tanks had earned a fearsome reputation, and their crews often viewed American Shermans as little more than targets. Stories circulated of German tankers laughing at the sight of Shermans advancing, certain that their own guns would make short work of the enemy. This confidence was not entirely misplaced. On open ground, a Panther or Tiger could destroy a Sherman before it got within effective range. But war is never static. The Americans adapted, learning from each encounter. They watched how the Germans fought, noted their patterns, and looked for weaknesses. Some crews began to experiment with new tactics, using smoke, maneuvering for side shots, and, crucially, finding ways to increase their rate of fire. It was in this environment of improvisation and necessity that one loader's trick would emerge, a method that would catch the Germans off guard and turn their confidence into chaos. The loader's innovation was simple, almost deceptively so. It required no new equipment, only a willingness to push the limits of what was considered possible. As word of his success spread, other crews took notice, eager to learn anything that might give them an edge in the deadly game of armored warfare. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only test the mettle of men and machines, but also the value of ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. Inside a Sherman tank, the world is reduced to steel, sweat, and the constant thrum of danger. 5 men, each with a role, each dependent on the others. The commander, perched in the turret, scanning for threats. The gunner, eyes locked on the sight, waiting for the next target. The driver and assistant driver, hunched over controls, feeling every jolt of the tracks. And the loader, arms and back aching, hands blackened with oil and powder, always reaching for the next shell. The loader's job is relentless. In the chaos of battle, he is the heartbeat of the gun. Every second matters. The difference between a quick reload and a fumble can mean survival or death. The loader's mind races. Count the shells, remember the order, anticipate the gunner's call. There is no time for hesitation. The tank rocks with every shot, the air thick with the smell of cordite and sweat. Outside, the world is a blur of noise and flashes, enemy tanks, infantry, the distant thunder of artillery. Camaraderie is forged in these moments. The crew becomes a family, bound by trust and the knowledge that each man's life is in the hands of the others. They share jokes, fears, and the rituals of daily survival, cleaning weapons, checking gear, writing letters home. But beneath the banter is a constant tension, a readiness to act when the next threat appears. The loader's trick, whispered about in the mess tent, is born from this pressure, a small act of rebellion against the odds, a way to tip the balance when everything is on the line. In tank combat, speed is everything. The first shot can cripple an enemy, but it is the follow-up that often decides the fight. German tanks, with their superior armor and firepower, could dominate a duel if given time to aim and fire. For American crews, the answer was aggression, move fast, shoot fast, and never give the enemy a chance to recover. The loader is at the center of this strategy. His ability to keep the gun firing, to reload in seconds rather than moments, is the difference between victory and defeat. Standard drills emphasize safety and rhythm, but in the heat of battle, some loaders push the limits. They develop shortcuts, stacking shells in a certain order, using their bodies to brace against the recoil, even risking minor burns or bruises to shave precious seconds off the reload. The loader's trick in this story is a culmination of these innovations. By pre-positioning shells, using a unique grip, and coordinating with the gunner through subtle signals, he is able to reload at a pace that seems impossible to outsiders. The result is a rate of fire that catches the enemy off guard, disrupting their plans and forcing them into mistakes. In the chaos of the Ardennes, where every second counts, this edge can turn the tide of battle. The Sherman and the Panther represent two philosophies of armored warfare. The German Panther, with its thick sloped armor and high-velocity 75mm gun, is a predator designed to engage at long range and destroy its targets with precision. Its optics are superior, its armor daunting, and its reputation fearsome. The American Sherman, by contrast, is a workhorse, reliable, easy to repair, and produced in vast numbers. Its 75mm gun is versatile, but struggles against the Panther's frontal armor. Its thinner steel makes it vulnerable, but its mechanical simplicity means it can keep moving when others break down. For the loader, these differences are more than technical details, they are the reality of survival. The Sherman's ammunition racks are designed for speed, but space is tight, and the risk of fire is ever present. The loader must work quickly, but also carefully, to avoid jams or accidents. German tanks, with their more spacious turrets and disciplined crews, have their own advantages, but they are not invincible. The loader's trick exploits the Sherman's strengths, its agility, its rapid-fire capability, and the willingness of its crew to push beyond the manual. In the end, technology sets the stage, but it is the human element, the loader's hands, his instincts, his refusal to accept defeat, that makes the difference. Leadership in the U.S. Army during the winter of 1944 was a study in contrasts. Official doctrine emphasized discipline, adherence to procedure, and the importance of safety in every action. Yet, the realities of the battlefield often demanded flexibility and a willingness to adapt. Officers and NCOs walked a fine line, balancing the need for order with the necessity of survival. When word of the loader's trick began to circulate among the tank crews, reactions from leadership were mixed. Some platoon leaders, veterans of earlier campaigns in North Africa and Italy, recognized the value of field innovation. They had seen firsthand how a clever solution could save lives when the standard issue failed. These leaders quietly encouraged their men to adapt, as long as safety and reliability were not compromised. Others, more rigid in their thinking or wary of breaking regulations, were skeptical. They worried about the risk of accidents, the potential for jams, and the possibility of setting a precedent for unauthorized modifications. Reports of the loader's success, however, began to filter up the chain of command. After the engagement where the Sherman's gun fired with unprecedented speed, some officers took a closer look. They questioned the crew, observed the technique, and weighed the risks against the undeniable results. In the end, the best leaders understood that survival on the front lines often depended on the courage to innovate. Enemy angle, German tank, crew confidence, and their reaction to unexpected American tactics. German tank crews entered the Ardennes offensive with a sense of superiority. Their tanks were the pride of the Wehrmacht, and their training emphasized precision, discipline, and the psychological edge of battlefield dominance. Many German tankers viewed American Shermans as little more than targets, machines to be destroyed with methodical efficiency. This confidence was not unfounded. In open country, a Panther or Tiger could destroy a Sherman before it got within effective range. German crews often laughed at the sight of American tanks advancing, certain that their own guns would make short work of the enemy. But war is never static. The Americans adapted, learning from each encounter, and began to exploit the Germans' overconfidence. When the loader's trick was first deployed, the German crews were caught off guard. They expected a slow, predictable rate of fire from the Shermans. Instead, they faced a barrage, shot after shot, faster than they believed possible. Confusion spread through the German ranks. Some believed they were facing multiple tanks. Others suspected a new weapon. The psychological impact was immediate. The laughter faded, replaced by uncertainty and, in some cases, panic. The American crew's innovation had turned the tables, transforming the hunter into the hunted. The story of the loader's trick is not just about tactics or technology. It is about the spirit of adaptation that defined the Allied war effort. The loader who developed the technique was not just solving a technical problem. He was taking a risk, challenging the status quo, and trusting his own judgment in the face of skepticism. This spirit was echoed across the front lines. Soldiers improvised repairs, invented new tools, and found ways to make do with what they had. Sometimes these innovations were celebrated. Sometimes they were quietly tolerated. And sometimes they were punished. But in the end, it was this willingness to adapt, to see a problem and refuse to accept defeat, that helped the Allies overcome the challenges of a brutal, unpredictable war. The loader's trick became a symbol of this ethos. It was a reminder that victory was not just a matter of numbers or firepower, but of human ingenuity and the courage to try something new. The loader's invention, born of necessity and refined by experience, would soon face its ultimate test in the crucible of battle, a test that would prove, beyond doubt, the value of thinking beyond the manual. December 19, 1944. The snow falls heavier now, blanketing the Ardennes in a deceptive calm. The American lines are thin, stretched across a series of ridges and frozen fields. In the early morning gloom, the distant rumble of engines signals the approach of a German armored column. Panzer IVs and Panthers, their crews confident, their guns already trained on the suspected American positions. Inside one Sherman, the crew is tense but focused. The commander peers through his periscope, searching for movement. The gunner checks his sights, adjusting for range and wind. The loader, heart-pounding, reviews his plan one last time. He has stacked shells in a precise order, each one within easy reach. His hands move with practiced speed, muscle memory honed by countless drills and the urgency of survival. The first German tank crests the rise, its turret swinging toward the American position. The Sherman's commander gives the order. The gunner fires, a flash, a deafening roar, and the loader is already reaching for the next shell. Before the echo fades, the gun fires again. And again. The loader's trick, his unique grip, his rapid handoff, his coordination with the gunner transforms the Sherman's rate of fire into something the Germans have never seen. The German crews, expecting a slow, methodical duel, are caught off guard. The lead Panzer IV takes a hit and lurches to a halt, smoke pouring from its engine deck. The Panther behind it hesitates, its commander shouting orders, but the Sherman's gun fires again, the loader's hands a blur. Another shot slams into the German column, and confusion spreads. The Germans, so sure of their advantage, now face a barrage that seems impossible from a single tank. American infantry, pinned down nearby, watch in disbelief as the Sherman holds its ground. The loader's trick is not just a technical feat, it is a psychological weapon. The Germans falter, their advance slowing as they try to regroup. Some tanks fire blindly, others reverse, unsure of the threat they face. The American crew, emboldened by their success, presses the attack, coordinating with supporting Shermans and anti-tank teams. The battle rages for nearly an hour. The loader never lets up, his arms aching, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The gunner and commander work in perfect sync, calling targets, adjusting aim, trusting the loader to keep the gun ready. The German column, battered and disorganized, begins to fall back. The laughter that greeted the American tanks at dawn is gone, replaced by the grim realization that the enemy has adapted and that their own confidence has become a liability. As the smoke clears, the field is littered with the wrecks of German armor. The Sherman, battered but intact, stands as a testament to the power of innovation and the will to survive. The loader slumps in his seat, exhausted but alive, his trick now proven in the crucible of battle. Word of the engagement spreads quickly. Other American crews, inspired by the loader's success, begin to adopt his methods. Officers take note, quietly encouraging their men to learn from the example. The Germans, for their part, are forced to reconsider their assumptions about American tankers. The balance of power has shifted, not through superior technology, but through the ingenuity and determination of a single crew. The battle for the Ardennes is far from over, but in this moment, the tide has turned. The loader's trick, born of necessity and refined by desperation, has changed the course of the fight and reminded both sides that in war, it is often the smallest innovations that make the greatest difference. The aftermath of the engagement is a study in exhaustion and disbelief. The Sherman's crew, hands shaking and uniforms soaked with sweat, sits in stunned silence as the battlefield quiets. The loader, his arms numb and fingers raw, leans back against the turret wall, the echo of each shot still ringing in his ears. Around them, the snow is churned and blackened, littered with the twisted hulks of German armor. Outside, American infantry emerge from their foxholes, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and awe. Some approach the Sherman, slapping the hull in gratitude, their voices hoarse with excitement. "How'd you do it?" one asks, staring at the loader, as if he's seen a magician at work. The loader manages a tired grin, shrugging off the attention. But the truth is clear. His trick, his relentless, almost reckless speed, has turned the tide. Word spreads quickly through the battalion. Other tank crews, having witnessed the impossible rate of fire, gather around the Sherman to see the loader's setup. He demonstrates his method, showing how he pre-stacked shells, how he braced himself to absorb the recoil, how he and the gunner developed a rhythm that shaved precious seconds off every reload. Some crews are skeptical, others eager to try it themselves. The loader's sergeant, once wary of unofficial techniques, now nods in approval, quietly telling his men to pay attention. The German side reels from the shock. Survivors of the armored column report back to their commanders, describing a Sherman that fired with impossible speed, as if manned by a crew possessed. Some believe they faced multiple tanks. Others suspect a new weapon. The psychological impact is immediate. German tankers, once so confident, now approach American positions with greater caution, wary of the unexpected. For the Americans, the loader's trick becomes a point of pride. Officers, initially skeptical, begin to circulate the story in after-action reports. Some even request demonstrations, hoping to standardize the technique across other crews. The loader, still humble, insists that anyone can do it with practice and teamwork. He spends the next days teaching others, passing on the small details that made the difference: how to grip the shell, how to anticipate the gunner's call, how to keep calm under fire. The battle for the Ardennes grinds on, but the momentum has shifted. The Germans, denied their easy victory, are forced to regroup and rethink their tactics. The Americans, buoyed by their success, fight with renewed confidence. The loader's trick, once a whispered secret, is now an open secret, a symbol of the ingenuity and resilience that defines the Allied effort. In the weeks that follow, the story spreads beyond the battalion. Letters home describe the day a single Sherman held off a German advance, the loader's name mentioned with admiration and a touch of legend. Other units begin to experiment, adapting the technique to their own needs. The loader's method is never officially written into the manuals, but it becomes part of the living knowledge passed from veteran to rookie, a quiet revolution born in the heat of battle. For the crew of the Sherman, the experience is transformative. Their bond, already strong, is now unbreakable. They have faced death together and survived, not just through training or firepower, but through the courage to innovate. The loader, once just another face in the turret, is now a symbol of what it means to adapt, to endure, and to prevail. As the snow continues to fall and the war moves on, the memory of that day lingers, a reminder that in the crucible of combat, it is often the smallest acts of ingenuity that leave the deepest mark. The days after the battle brought a rare sense of pride and unity to the battered American lines. The Ardennes, still gripped by winter's chill, was now marked by the wreckage of German armor and the quiet confidence of men who had faced the worst and endured. For the crew of the Sherman, the loader's trick was no longer just a personal innovation. It had become a story that traveled far beyond their own platoon. Tank crews from neighboring companies came to see the loader's method firsthand. In the evenings, men gathered around the Sherman, eager to learn the rhythm and technique that had made such a difference. The loader, still modest, demonstrated his approach with patience, showing how to stack shells for quick access, how to brace for recoil, and how to communicate with the gunner in a seamless flow. The camaraderie of shared danger and discovery brought crews together, forging bonds that would last long after the snow melted. Leadership took notice. After-action reports highlighted the engagement, noting the unusual but effective rate of fire from the Sherman. Some officers, previously skeptical of field improvisation, now encouraged their crews to experiment within reason with methods that could improve performance. The loader's sergeant, once a stickler for regulation, openly praised his initiative, telling the story in the mess tent as an example of what could be achieved when men trusted their instincts and each other. The impact of the loader's trick rippled outward. Other battalions began to hear of the engagement, and soon tankers across the division were trying their own variations. Some found success, others struggled to match the original's speed, but all recognized the value of thinking beyond the manual. The loader's name became a quiet legend, spoken with respect in the close-knit world of armored crews. For the Germans, the defeat was sobering. Intelligence reports noted a shift in American tactics, and tank commanders were warned to expect more aggressive, unpredictable fire from Shermans. The psychological edge that German armor once held was now blunted by the knowledge that the enemy could and would adapt in ways they had not anticipated. The loader's trick was never officially adopted by the Army, but its legacy endured. It became part of the unwritten lore of the Armored Corps, a story told to new recruits and remembered by veterans. For the men who had lived it, the lesson was clear. In war, survival often depends on the courage to innovate, to trust in one's own skill, and to never underestimate the power of a single idea. As the Ardennes thawed and the Allied advance resumed, the story of the loader's trick continued to echo through the ranks. In the weeks that followed, more Shermans rolled into action with loaders quietly practicing the new method, each crew adapting the technique to their own rhythm and teamwork. The loader's original approach was copied, refined, and sometimes improved upon. But the spirit of innovation remained the same. Do what it takes to survive, and never let the enemy dictate the pace. The loader himself remained humble, content to see his idea help others. He never sought recognition, and his name rarely appeared in official reports. Yet among the men who fought in the steel hulls of their tanks, his reputation grew. Letters home described the day a single Sherman held off a German advance, and the loader's method became a point of pride for the entire battalion. In training camps back in the States, instructors began to mention the Ardennes loader as an example of battlefield ingenuity, encouraging new recruits to learn from the front lines. The Army's higher command, always cautious about unofficial modifications, took note of the trend. Some officers worried about the risks. What if a rushed reload led to an accident, or a jam at a critical moment? But the evidence from the field was hard to ignore. After-action reports consistently showed that tanks using the loader's trick were more likely to maintain suppressive fire, disrupt enemy attacks, and support infantry advances. Quietly, some supply officers began to encourage crews to experiment, and a few forward-thinking commanders even requested studies on improving standard gunnery drills. For the men on the ground, the loader's trick became a symbol of something larger. It represented the spirit of adaptation that defined the Allied war effort, the willingness to bend the rules, to trust in the experience and creativity of ordinary soldiers. In a war where so much depended on mass production and standardization, the success of a single loader's idea was a reminder that victory also depended on the courage to innovate. As the war in Europe drew to a close, the loader's story faded into the background of countless other tales of survival and ingenuity. Some crews kept the technique as a closely guarded secret, passing it on only to those they trusted. Others shared it freely, proud to be part of a tradition of adaptation and resilience. The loader's trick was never written into the manuals, but it lived on in the stories told by veterans, in the quiet pride of those who survived, and in the enduring truth that, in war, the smallest act of courage can change the course of a battle. History often remembers the thunder of guns, the clash of armor, and the names of generals who shaped the fate of nations. Yet, beneath the headlines and the grand strategies, it is the small acts of ingenuity, the quiet courage to adapt, that so often tip the balance between survival and loss. The story of the American loader's trick is not just about a single tank or a single battle. It is about the spirit that animated thousands of ordinary soldiers thrust into extraordinary circumstances. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, one loader's refusal to accept the limits of standard procedure became a lifeline for his crew and a lesson for all who witnessed it. His hands, raw from work and trembling with fatigue, stitched together more than just a new rhythm of reloading. He stitched together hope, resilience, and the will to endure. For the men of that Sherman, and for countless others who followed their example, the loader's trick was a symbol of what it meant to fight, not just with weapons, but with wits. It was a reminder that the difference between defeat and victory can hinge on the willingness to try, to risk, and to believe in the value of one's own ideas, even when others doubt or laugh. As the guns fell silent and the world began to rebuild, the legacy of such moments endured. The loader's innovation was never celebrated in parades or written into official doctrine, but it lived on in the stories told by those who survived. It stands as a quiet testament to the power of adaptation, the necessity of courage, and the enduring truth that, in the crucible of war, the human spirit is the greatest weapon of all.